On some of the other topics that were suggested. Why don't we talk, and actually, so I'm going to pick a friendly one.
Wasn't that? This was the bipartisan retirement legislation, right?
So, Mike, the House passed Bipartisan Senior Security Act of 2019, and that actually came out of the House Financial Services Committee and then ultimately passed the House. Tell us a little bit about that. It's not a major impact issue for us, but it was something that we were supportive of. What does it do?
Basically, a lot of you will remember who've been here before and just that followed NAIFA public policy in general will remember the Senior Safe Act, which we had passed last year. The Senior Security Act, what it does is it's kind of a complementary bill. It's bipartisan. Representatives Gottheimer from New Jersey, Democrat, and Hollingsworth from Indiana, Republican, introduced the legislation together. It passed committee, it passed the House. What it does is it sets up a 10-year study by the SEC to look at how fraud and abuse of senior investors is actually being conducted and how it's really impacting that demographic of society. So it's an actual attempt to discover more information. And what it does is it gives them an opportunity to really look at what the issues are that cause the underlying financial hardships and the fraud that's coming along with that. So it's kind of like a complement to the Senior Safe Act. It's more of an attempt to further the protection of America's most vulnerable investors. And it's one of those things, if you look at financial services, the committee, whereas we talked about how major legislation, such as, say, the Secure Act, RISA, there's the partisan infighting just because you don't want the other side to have a victory. The one thing that you'll see in committees like financial services are these innocuous bills that are essentially consumer friendly, have a benefit to financial advisors to a degree. Those are the kind that'll get through committee and through the House just because at some point you have to pass something, right? You have to show some kind of effort, especially if you want to retain power for the Democrats. And so these kind of innocuous, under-the-radar bills, they don't get the same kind of heat, the same kind of coverage. Those are the things that we can really hope for and take advantage of from what our perspective is in the industry to really help our consumers, our clients, and also ourselves.
And let the record reflect. RISA began as one of those bills, and then it developed momentum, and all of a sudden it became a vehicle for infighting.
Mm-hmm. All right, Danny, so you took our nice happy talk and turned it right back over. So since we're talking about not happy things, someone had suggested, why don't we talk about Senator Wyden's proposal to annually tax appreciation of assets? So once we get through this, what type of tax legislation are we looking at? Tell us a little bit about Senator Wyden's bill.
Well, it's still in the process of being developed. It is going to be different, I am told, from previous iterations of it. The goal is to generate more tax revenue from people who have a lot of money. It's the whole tax the rich political propaganda. His problem right now is how wide to make the base. The idea is to impose a small tax on everything that's currently either taxed at a lesser rate, like capital gains, or not taxed at all. But there are some things that just shouldn't be taxed, one of which is life insurance cash values. I am hopeful. I'm not guaranteeing you anything. I've been surprised before, which is a nice way of saying wrong. But I am hopeful that they will leave annuities and life insurance out of the tax base. But the idea is to tax the annual increase in investment value on as many investments as they can politically get away with at a somewhat lower rate in order to lower the gap between the haves and the have-nots. It's the whole income inequality thing. There is not a snowball's chance in Hades that this bill will get even a whole lot of consideration this year. It's being developed solely by Senator Wyden. He is in the minority in the Senate. But it will play into those 23 Democratic presidential campaign speeches that you hear, because tax the rich and income inequality is a pretty big ticket presidential campaign issue right now.
Will he give you a credit in years that you lose money in the value?
Life insurance and annuities don't lose value, Pat.
Good point. Another reason to leave them out.
Another topic that was suggested that we talk a little bit about was the fact that we had mentioned Medicare for All. And the reason that we had sort of brought it up, we gave you in your sheets that you'll look at during the state caucus, is who's supporting that legislation. That, very much like Senator Wyden's proposal, isn't something that we expect to go anywhere in the Senate at all. It has its own problems in the House, but it's something that we wanted to make sure that you guys were aware of. The issue that was brought up for us to discuss was also, shouldn't we be more concerned with making sure every American has access to medical care, and talk about some of the other issues that we have with the healthcare delivery system? And the answer is absolutely yes. And NAIFA does have a very comprehensive prescription for reform that we support. The reason that we're talking about Medicare for All at all is that we talk about what they want to talk about. And, you know, Pat, you may want to touch on that, or Scott, why we're seeing that issue sort of bubble up. And
Well, Senator McConnell, the majority leader, has said that he thinks he'd like to bring Medicare for None to the floor for a vote. And which brings me to a point that you may hear as you talk to staff, particularly staff on both Senate, House, Democrat and Republican, talking about, well, the Senate's not going to do anything. The fact of the matter is, Leader McConnell has made it pretty clear he's not bringing any bills to the floor that aren't assured of swift passage. So that is something that you may have to build into your pitch tomorrow. When someone says, well, it's got plenty of sponsors already, you don't need me to co-sponsor it. Yes, we do, particularly in the Senate. We need more co-sponsors.
So you're veering away from the Medicare for All, right? I just want to be sure we're clear.
Yes, Medicare for None will get a vote, and it won't be pretty for most of the senators. But just if someone tells you they're not bringing any legislation to the floor in the Senate, that's true unless it's assured of passage. So that's why you want to ask the members to co-sponsor the bill and talk to their leadership, whether they're Senate, House, Republican, or Democratic, and say to their leader, please bring this bill to the floor quickly.
I love the phrase, the other party is the opposition, the other chamber is the enemy. It's clearly how they think about it in the House and Senate. So Medicare for All is interesting, right? Because people perceive here that there's still a problem. There's not universal access, there's a problem, and we're hunting for solutions. But the Democrats who are supporting Medicare for All, they don't even know what's in the bill. So there was this great exchange on Sunday with a couple of the...
That sounds familiar.
Yeah, I know. But with some of the presidential candidates who insisted that you could still keep your insurance under a Medicare for All proposal, which of course you can't, at least not under Bernie Sanders' proposal. But look, on this issue, on the Wyden tax proposal, it's the beginning of a discussion. And so I think we need to be engaged, because it won't happen this year. It's not going to happen in a Republican-controlled Senate. But if the Senate flips, if the White House flips, you may see a new dynamic, and you're laying groundwork. People are laying groundwork today for what might happen 1, 2, 5 years down the road. We worked on H.R. 10. It was a 20-year bill, right, that ended in Graham-Leach-Bliley in 99. It took 20 years for that to pass, and then it had tremendous repercussions. I think you're seeing the beginning of that. And so the Medicare for All, no, it's not going to pass today. But it's going to start to gain traction, and we need to be vigilant in terms of beating it back and making people understand what it would do and what alternative solutions are to get to the same point.
Yeah, no, well, some things take 10, 20 years and often do. Then you look at something like the National Flood Insurance Program, which expires, I don't know, May 31st, 2019. And so we wait until the very last minute before they start addressing issues. You want to take a first stab at that, or you want me to toss it over to Mike to kick it off?
On flood?
Flood.
Maxine,
that
she's got her bill. It's going to be on the floor, we think, as early as this week.
Today.
And it'll take us right through September 30th.
Long-term solution.
It's on the floor today, Scott. At least it's on the suspension calendar for today.
I'm with Pat. That's this week.
Yes, it is.
Mike, you.
No, that's exactly it. I mean, they've been kicking the can down the road for the last 4 years now. I mean, since
Only 4 years?
only 4 years. I don't know. It's like, and every time it's anywhere between a month to a 3-month reauthorization. But they are saying, as they've been saying for the last 3 years, that come September, they're finally going to work out. There's optimism that they're going to work something out in terms of long-term deal.
So we may go
In
like 6
September?
months, maybe a whole year.
Maybe to the end of the year.
We're not cynical either.
TRIA is a lot less controversial in terms of partisanship than flood. But I mean, they're not. Congress. It's just a matter. Honestly, in terms of the short-term reauthorizations, it's really difficult to make sure those policies stay in effect. If you're issuing new policies, there have been periods where they've had where there was an overlap and the policies, their NFIP was actually unfunded. But at the same point, as long as the existing regulations are in effect, even if it's not legislatively positive, the provisions in NFIP are still beneficial to our members that sell those policies. So I'm complaining, but I'm not complaining that much.
Well, that works.
It does.
Oh my
help
gosh,
that
you guys are killing me. You are all killing me. So let me just a couple of things. In April of this year, the House Ways and Means Committee voted unanimously to pass the Secure Act out of the House and send it to the floor. Unanimously bipartisan, 100% bipartisan. Everybody was happy. It was the most amazing kumbaya markup I think I've ever seen. 2 years ago, the RISA bill passed out of the Senate Finance Committee unanimously. There are some things that can get done in the things that you're talking about tomorrow, which don't include flood, Medicare, or the 529 mess. There are ways that Congress can do things that will make it easier for employers to put in plans and improve retirement. They're just a bunch of little things that are good fixes that aren't controversial. And so sometimes Congress can, and I hope we're going to show soon, that Congress does pay attention. And besides that, they're sick of hearing about RISA, so I think they'll pass it just so they don't have to hear it anymore.
Yeah, I think they will. Who watched? Has anyone had an opportunity to watch the Senate Finance hearing this morning? So there was a hearing on retirement in the Senate Finance Committee, and I expect the reports are going to come back very much like the Ways and Means hearing on retirement, where it's going to be bipartisan. There's going to be a recognition of the need. There's going to be support for general provisions that we're supporting. So your messaging really is easy. We're delving down into some of the talking points that our members have asked to talk about and why we're talking about them or why they're out there or why they're hearing about them. And yeah, there's a lot of tension in Congress, but to Judy's point, I think when you have a policy and can focus, this is the challenge, focus their attention on the policy and not the politics, there really is a lot of room. Insurance isn't partisan. It's good for everyone. And so when we start talking about what it is that you do, and that goes back to what Jill and Kevin were talking about, tell your stories, tell what you do well. Don't go into a meeting with your politics on your sleeve. It shouldn't be. It may be on the members. We absolutely can't. We try to brush Pat off before we put him in any offices, but there's only so much we can do.
He's really good in Republican office.
Some of our questions, too.